Ex-inmates, what's the worst thing you've witnessed behind bars? My uncle used to tell me a bunch of stories of when he was locked up. He served 12 years, so it goes without saying that he's seen some crap. In my opinion, the craziest story would be the one where the prisoners found out who amongst them was a snitch. One day on the courtyard, my uncle saw a guy's snitch body being tossed in the air like a ragdoll as they beat him with sticks and other blunt weapons, as if they were trying to keep a volleyball in play. Another less serious but funny story of my uncle in prison is that he once whacked himself off and unknowingly cleaned himself with a towel that had hot sauce spill over it during the night. The whole prison stayed awake from his cries that night. Daughter of a former inmate here. My mom said she honestly never seen anything that bad during her 18-month stay. She said that the worst part of being in prison was always being afraid of her roommate. Her roommate was doing life for murdering her boyfriend. She got really high and killed him, and whatever she was high on made her paranoid. So the roommate started to actually eat the boyfriend because she said it was the only way to completely hide the body. Back to my gangster days when I went to prison for drug possession. I was surrounded by murderers, rapists, all kinda of crazy people. Craziest crap I can remember. Child molesters had it the worst. Daily beatings from many different groups within. The guards would get word around as to who had crimes against females or children. Worst I witnessed was when a molester was sitting alone and a group of men walked towards him in rage after discovering his offense. He was beaten by 12 to 15 men for a solid 10 minutes, blood everywhere. The guy couldn't move and was breathing so loudly after, and I could see his chest pumping from the other side of the courtyard. None of the guards did anything to stop this. He was transferred after. Not prison, but the county jail. Some guy tried to kill himself by slitting his wrists. For some reason what made it bad for me to witness wasn't the fact that he tried to kill himself and failed, but every single person on the pod laughed and made fun of him while they were wheeling him out. There was less than zero remorse. It gave those people pleasure. That was disturbing to me. My brother has been in and out of prison most of his life. One story he told me. He was in his cell while he watched a guard escorting another prisoner shackled and handcuffed to another section of the prison. So they were walking down the block when another prisoner got out of his cell holding a 12-inch shank made of some piece of scrap. Once the guard see the other prisoner, he takes off, leaving the prisoner shackled and defenseless. The other prisoner starts stabbing this guy over and over. They fall to the ground and my brother said, "You could hear the guy screaming, 'Stop stabbing me,' and the other guy says, 'Stop breathing.'" He said there were chunks of concrete gouged out from the shank going all the way through. I was not an inmate, but a prison guard that worked on death row / maximum security in a state penitentiary. Every hour we had to check on the inmates and perform a head count. I went up to one particular cell door and the inmate was standing very close to the steel door. As I looked through the plexiglass window, he had this blank, almost catatonic look in his eye. I asked him to take a few steps back from the door. He complied without any problem, but then I noticed a large pool of blood on the floor. I radioed for some other officers and we cuffed him up through the cuff port and pulled him out of the cell. He was completely naked and he had blood running down his legs. Upon closer inspection I noticed that his scrotum was cut open and one of his testicles was hanging out. We called the infirmary and escorted him to the medtechs. They put his testicle back in his sack and sewed him up. Almost immediately after that he started picking at the stitches to try to open up his sack again. They had to shackle his hands to the bed to get him to stop. Come to find out, he had used the plastic knife and fork that we give them with their meals to cut open his sack. After that, we could no longer give anyone plasticware with their meals. I'm not in prison, but my ex-husband is. One night he called, talked to our son for a few minutes, and then the phone got handed off to me. He was telling me about how long his hair had gotten, and then he just stopped talking. I first thought that someone must have come up and interrupted him with a prison conversation, because that happened a lot, but then he never got back on the line. I said hello a couple times and no response. So I sat and listened. Eventually I hear medical emergency. Also someone saying, "Hang in there man, hang in there." At this point I'm freaking out, have no idea what happened. Someone picked up the phone that was left hanging and hung it up. Then I was just waiting to see if someone would call to tell me if he was dead. About 24 hours later he finally gets to call me and let me know he was okay. He was hit in the back of the head with what was probably a lock in a sock, had a huge knot on his head, knocked him clean out. He landed on his face on a concrete partition type thing and chipped a couple teeth. I don't think he got a beating aside from that. He spent a couple days in the infirmary and went back. From what he heard, after he got back the dude hit him. Based on some rumors that weren't true, fellow inmates made that clear to the group that targeted him, and the guy that hit him got another year tacked on his sentence. All caught on tape apparently. From my experience with him, main thing inside is the extortion and threats that stem off it. Here I am, a single mom trying to make it with no help from him yet still trying to help him out. There was a lot of moving money around. Send $50 here, send $100 there. It took me a while to figure out that it was extortion because he wouldn't tell me details. He's got no family worth a damn, so I'm all he's got, and I may be the only one who believes he was wrongly convicted. He's since been moved from the maximum security facility into a medium security and it's better already. People there don't want to do anything that might get them shipped back to max. I spent some time in Juve a couple months before my 18th birthday. Think of it as an honor student that played too much jet set radio growing up. I got the dumb idea to go spray some tags downtown. One of the best of times was when I met my first cellmate. This kid was a straight thug. I learned he'd been shot before even. So, being the manipulative a-hole I am, I make sure I keep the bunk bed. The other option was the floor, so that I'm basically the alpha in our little relationship. I'm a bit of an empath, so I just channeled his hard ass mentality right back at him twofold. One day he tells me he smuggled in some sleeping pills. At this point I'm so bored I convince him to snort them with me in exchange for the bed. I rip off the cover of Return of the King and roll it up. This has to be the best night I ever had. Locked up. Brushing my teeth was the best sensation. The shower was hilarious. Nobody calls a middle shower because you're between two guys. So, I strip naked and just yell middle. So everyone on the floor can hear me. The trolls. Afterward, the best bit, they let us all relax and watch some TV before bed. I'm high as hell just laughing my ass off at Sports Center. There are a couple more funny stories from that place, but never in my life did I imagine I would be high watching TV in jail. Couple of years ago I was incarcerated for selling weed. Judge gave me 3 months though, so it wasn't all that bad. I guess the cell was the type where you would share it with 6 to 8 people, with bunk beds and a toilet in the corner. The whole building was rather dreary colored grey with specks of darker grey here and there for a bit of variety. The guys were pretty much just your average people, but there was this one guy who creeped me out a bit. They told me he was in for pub brawling. Apparently he glassed a cunt over some affair. He kept coming on to people in the cell for the littlest things, trying to start something, just to relieve himself from his frustration. This one night, when we had to return to cells as usual, with the guards having left for their dinner break, the prick went and hit my bunk bed partner. He slept on the top. The guy fell off the bed with his leg slapping me over the face as he dropped my book. The two guys went at it struggling, but the glassing cunt had the upper hand probably from experience. He kept hitting the other guy over the head constantly. None of the other guys and me wanted to do anything with that, so we just stepped back watching the two of them go at it for about 10 minutes. Glassing cunt then got sexually frustrated and ripped the other guy's trousers off, pulling his underwear down, and straight up shafted his penis into the anus. Ex-boyfriend did sometime. He told me about the scariest thing to happen while he was in prison, taking a shower. One other bloke in there at the time, when 2 other guys came in with some sort of blade and both attacked the other dude, completely opening up his back. Blood everywhere. Ex-BF jumps up on side of bathtub. I think it was a bathtub, to avoid blood. The 2 other dudes turned to him and said, "You saw nothing?" Ex-BF said he was shaking like a crapping dog. He was only 18 at the time. Guards came in promptly. Other dude lived. The 2 gay guys got into a big argument in the hall at the pill window. Inmate 1 had been spreading rumors that inmate 2 had AIDS. This was ruining inmate 2's prostitution hustle. They got back to out barracks, and inmate 2 went to his bunk and got a weapon. His weapon was a bundle of sharpened pencils wrapped with tape and string, etc. He attacked inmate 1 from behind, trying to stab him in the neck. Inmate 1 realized something was happening and turned. The pencils instead ripped his ear off. He grabbed his head in shock. Inmate 2 bent over, grabbed the ear, and flushed it down the toilet. Throwaway account here. This one guy got out of control with his debts to other inmates, borrowing against his credit at the prison store, never repaid. The guy was just a lazy asshole, and so one day he climbed up the outside of a cell block and sat on the roof, yelling down these demands to the guards for stupid crap like a car and his own massage therapist. Basically he wanted to get stuck in solitary so he wouldn't have to confront the guys he owed. Standard procedure when someone climbs up is to lock down the area, so everyone is in their cells during the daytime for like 2 days while this idiot stays up there. He finally comes down, gets sent to solitary for I think 2 weeks. Then when he comes back, this lifer who he didn't owe anything to stabs him for making him miss his turn on the weights from being in lockdown during his stunt. Not prison, but county. Was doing 30 days. There was a guy locked up in one of the segregation cells by the cop's desk who would yell random stuff all through the night. Saw him through his window a few times during free time. This guy looked exactly like Saddam Hussein. His screaming would keep me up every night, though it was hard enough sleeping on a concrete slab with a blanket on it. Anyways, one night I woke up and noticed the screaming had stopped. A few moments later an officer came by my cell and took away my sheets and pillowcase, leaving only those damagey recycled blankets made of horse pubes or something. Find out the next morning that the dude had hanged himself using his sheets and pillowcase as a rope. It wasn't prison, but Chicago jail. I had my own cell, and there were empty cells around me. I could hear some commotion coming my way, some yelling. All of a sudden I see 2 cops roughly escorting a young black male. I'm guessing he was 18 to 20. They were yelling at him for stealing a bike, and he was basically resisting the direction they were pushing him. They opened my cell and started to push him in, him still resisting. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and they both just gave him a big shove and he ran face first into a brick wall. He starts bleeding and whimpering as he collapses on the floor. Cops look at each other in a god damn it kind of way and drag him feet first out of the cell. Trail of blood from his face. Never saw him or the 2 cops again. I was quite obedient after that scene. Did a 2-month stretch for cocaine. Was put in solitary and not general population because I was in the military. My only interaction was with the librarian and the guards when they took me to this dog kennel like thing for outside time. They always took me in the morning and I always asked what's for lunch. One day, we stroll. I ask and they just laugh and say it's late as night. I'm way confused and curious, but I can't get any more out of them. Lunch shows up, tray through the slot. I must have looked like a crazy person just standing there laughing hysterically while staring down at 2 hot dogs. It was crazy hilarious. The craziest by a long stretch was a white-black riot involving a couple hundred people. I woke up after the flash grenades started going off, but out my window I saw a huge dirt yard covered in tear gas with tons of guys on the ground and a handful of people running through the tear gas to stab each other. The purpose of the riot was for the skinheads to kill a white guy named Snow, who was running with the blacks because he was a blood. Unfortunately, I believe they succeeded. Second story is much lighter. I was in a different place, living in a dorm. One time the dorm got raided, front and back doors popped open, the cops they called the goon squad came rushing in, and if you look closely you can see like 5 out of the 30 inmates of my dorm simultaneously shoving cell phones in their butts. One poor guy had 2, and one was an LG Encore. Not exactly the Galaxy S3, but definitely bigger than a flip phone. Every one of them passed the spread your cheeks and cough test on the way out of the dorm. I should probably throw away this, but oh well. Once every couple of weeks, we got a decent meal. It was Hot Link Day. People traded and gambled away their meal trays as part of daily business and getting through the days, and every once in a while, someone would have lost their tray and suddenly it was Hot Link Day. Turns out losing the only half decent meal you've had in a while will turn men into more of animals than all the other realities of living in a cage combined. Grown men begging and sniveling, but more often the fighting. The worst dirty nasty violent fights would happen over those trays. and the rest of the prisoners would protect their trays off to the sides, and then without any question they would huddle up and protect the winner to make sure he got to eat his before the guards did anything punishment wise. To add to the crazy, the guards never ever intervened in those fights, no matter how insane they got. I remember on a couple of occasions seeing 5 to 6 guards all leaning on the bars outside one pod watching the fight like it was pay-per-view. Like and subscribe for more Reddit videos.